Hey guys, Mike here with EBR, and this is the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus. It's a modern e-bike, but it's got the looks of a classic vintage cafe cruiser. I spent the last couple weeks with it and really put it through its paces, both on and off pavement, and got some thoughts on where it shines and where it could use some improvements. So let's take a deep dive on the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus. All right, so the Valen Rev Plus ships as a Class 2 e-bike limited to 20 miles an hour, but it is Class 3 capable, and you can very easily unlock it to 28 miles an hour once you get yours. Now, this bike is priced at $17.99, and when it comes to safety certifications, the battery is UL 2271 certified, and the bike itself is 2849 certified by UL standards. Now, they say this bike weighs 72 pounds. I put this one up on the scale and it came in right around just over 80 pounds, like 80.5. When I took the battery out though, we went back down to that 72. So about an 8-pound battery and a total bike weight of about 80 pounds. When it comes to colors, so this is the OD green, but they also have a matte black if that's not your style. And it comes in one frame size that you see here, and that fits what they say is 5 foot flat all the way up to 6'4", so a really wide range in general, but there's not going to be any kind of situation where you get a dialed in moped style bike fit to you for biking or pedaling. They're just not meant to be that. There's no proper pedal extension on the seats. It's going to be kind of a sit and throttle mostly bike, but you can pedal. It's just not going to be comfortable if you're over 5'7" or so. When it comes to the geometry on this, there's not a lot of typical bike geometry, so I'll go through what we do have. We've got a 31.5-inch fixed seat height, and you have about a 350-pound max payload capacity on this. Now, I'd like to see in future models them to add some sort of spacers or way to kind of add height to the seat. That way you could at least maybe get a proper pedal extension and not take away from the looks of the bike, but the way it sits right now, it is a fixed seat height. Now, when it comes to things like tires and wheels, they did go with 20-inch alloys, and those are wrapped in a CST tire that's got a nice reflective sidewall and some light knobby patterns, and this is sized at 20 inches by 3 inches wide. Now, when it comes to fenders, we do have front and back fenders. They are a plastic fender with nice supports on them, the alloy bar supports, but the fender itself is PVC, which you guys know by now we'd prefer because they're not going to bend permanently like metal ones, they're not going to rust, and they're not going to rattle off-road, or at least audibly like a metal one would. So we just generally prefer seeing a PVC fender. When it comes to rear racks, so there's no rear rack included with this because you have this fixed elongated Moto-style saddle, but you do have lots of anchor points for like bungee cords or straps should you want to stack up a backpack, some gear, or even if you had a passenger back here, although I wouldn't strap them onto it with a bungee cord. You can basically manage your cargo back here. There's just no dedicated rack. Now, when it comes to mounting points, we do have these anchors right here. And then we have two for a water bottle cage or some sort of accessory mount on the two bosses on that down tube. When it comes to lighting, there is a front Moto-style headlight that's rated at 100 lux. It's actually really bright, looks really good. And in the rear, you do have a wired-in tail light that also doubles as a brake light when you hit the brakes up front. All right, so this bike does have a rear hub motor. It's 750 watts and it's in this rear hub. Now this motor is rated at 65 Newton meters of torque and its nominal wattage of 750. And it's activated by a cadence sensor. Now normally we would say a torque sensor would be more of a natural pedaling feel and kind of a more premium option. But in this case, in the case of really all mopeds in my opinion, cadence sensors are the way to go. And that's because you don't have proper pedaling extension with this Moto saddle, which is by design and normal, but you don't want a torque sensor also because you're not giving proper pedaling pressure. And instead, if I move the cranks, a cadence sensor is just going to make it go, which is kind of ideal on a bike that's not going to be dialed in fit-wise for pedaling. Now, when it comes to the battery, we have in the down tube this fully integrated 48-volt battery. It's got 15 amp hours and a total of 720 watt hours. Now, it does come with a key so you can remove it for charging or safekeeping. I'll show you how that's removed now. So this is the key it comes with. It's on this left side, non-drive side. You just turn the key and that will drop it out right there into your hand. And like I said, this is UL 2271 certified. And this, as well as the whole bike, has a 2-year warranty. Now, when it comes to range, they say you can get between 30 and 50 miles. I did this range test on throttle only because of, well, the pedaling we talked about. And that's kind of how I expect most people to use these type of bikes. And I was still able to get 30 miles or right about 30 miles on a single charge, which is a very solid distance, almost 2 hours of riding. So all in all, it handled that very well. You simply put this back by taking it the opposite way you pulled it out. And so we will put that back in now. Bottom in first, and then the top will just clip in. And there you go. So when it comes to the component lineup on the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus, we've got an 8-speed Shimano Altus drivetrain, and that's going to be made up of this Altus rear derailleur and a Shimano 11-34 rear cassette. Now up front, that's mated to a chainring that's got 38 teeth on it, or 38T chainring with dual-sided chain guards. And then you have alloy 170mm crank arms with flat plastic pedals that do have some traction studs and reflectors. In terms of braking, they went with a solid, reputable Tektro hydraulic disc brakes. And these are 2-piston calipers with 180mm rotors, front and back. I found the braking on this bike to be really good. I never needed more, and I think for this style of bike, that braking is certainly sufficient. That setup is. When it comes to the saddle, we do have this elongated kind of moto-style saddle. It is fixed in height. You can't really adjust it, but it's super comfortable, and especially on a bike, you're just going to sit back and throttle for a while. I mean, you could really do it all day on this seat. Super comfortable, and it's got room for a second passenger. If you're kind of within that payload, you could probably pull that off as well. Now up front, a front suspension fork. So it's kind of a, or not kind of, it is a dual crown inverted front suspension with 100mm of travel. Now you do have preload and compression settings at the top of each crown, and the compression works in increments. When it's all the way open, you get a full you can fully depress the front fork for all 100mm. But if you crank it all the way, then you're fully locked out. So you can pick incremental steps in between, or you can go fully open or fully closed. It's kind of just how you want to ride the bike. Or if you're traveling and you're putting it in the back of a truck and you're putting straps on it, you can lock it out and make it just more secure when you do that. Now up front, we do have a BMX style handlebar with a fixed kind of beefed up stubby stem here. On either end, we have rubber lock-on grips and our Tektro brake levers, as well as our PAS control panel, a bell. And on this side, we have the Shimano trigger shifters that are under the bar that do have an 8-speed window, so you know what gear you're in as you're switching. And then you have your push throttle on this side. And finally, in the center, your Retrospec color display. But let's take a closer look at some of the options in display now. All right, guys, so this is the home screen on the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus. This is the screen you're greeted with when you turn the bike on. And frankly, it's the only screen you're gonna work in when you have this bike. There are advanced menus. I'm not gonna go into them only because they do have kind of specified symbols that you'll need to follow along with a manual for them to make sense. But just know there are a couple advanced settings you can tweak on the back end. But starting with the home screen here, up top we have the current PAS level, which uniquely on this bike, generally there's 3 PAS levels or 5 PAS levels, but this one actually has 6. So 1 being the lowest, all the way up to 6. Now, these are actuated by these levers, plus and minus on the left side here. And if you hit the M button or mode button, it will toggle this center between current speed, average speed, and max speed. And that would be for the current trip you're on. On the left side, we've got a battery bar meter, 5-bar meter that's currently full. And on the right, you have a wattage meter. If we were riding and the motor was putting out power, we would get a real-time kind of meter of wattage as we drove the bike. Down at the bottom, we have the odometer with 180 miles. And really that is the screen it's kind of a no fuss, straightforward display. It's color, it is LCD. It's generally bright enough. I've not had any issues. It's not super bright, but it's definitely bright enough to get around and have, you know, see what you need to on the ride without any issues. But all in all, that does wrap it up. Remember, if you do want to tweak the advanced settings on this, you're gonna need the manual because there's just a bunch of symbols for the areas to tweak, and it won't make a lot of sense unless you have that manual. All right, guys, let's take a look at the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus from a build quality or just build perspective, as well as kind of a mechanics perspective, things you might encounter or might give you headaches, or things that are just stand out as good as far as how they put this together. Now, before I jump into it, I just want to say thank you to Feedback Sports. They provided us with a few of their Pro HD aluminum racks. These fold up compact, they're lightweight and easy to get around, but they're also super convenient and just flexible. They can do a lot. and hold up any of the e-bikes that we have, including these big, beefy, and just awkwardly framed moped-style bikes. If you like stuff like this, or you do your own tweaking on your bikes and you want to check them out, I will put a link down in the description. Now, let's just kick it off with some things that stood out about the build of the bike or the maintenance aspects of the bike as some positives to us. So first things first, we have a bolted axle here on the front tire. This connection point is really important. I mean, obviously it's two wheels on a bike, but beyond that, this is a bike that's designed to go off-road, hit big bumps, go at high speeds. And when you have all of that, and this is the brunt of all the impacts absorbed through this fork, this contact point needs to be very beefy and solid. And that's exactly what a bolted axle does. Sure, it's a little bit more of a headache if you got to take the tire off and repair it or something like that, but I'd much rather have an extra 30 seconds of repair work than a tire fork connection that's not super solid on a bike that's meant to take a lot of abuse and off-road work. So good job on the front bolt axle there. Another thing, we have plastic fenders, a very smart option for this. We see alloy or metal fenders all too often on e-bikes, but on a bike that's designed to go do the work that this is designed to do, you don't want fenders that are metal clanging around, rusting and denting when they bump into things. Another feature on here is the offset spokes. This is a really nice touch on their build quality. Because these wheels are wide, they offset the spokes. So instead of them being in a pattern straight to the wheel, they've offset them to split that weight disbursement and pressure points equally throughout. And it just creates a better footprint for the bike. It's a better stable platform for the wheel and tire, and it's just a better choice when they design this. Also, the last thing on some of the build quality and maintenance aspects that stand out on this bike, normally with e-bike frames, your controller and your motor are kind of hard to get to, especially controllers. This controller is right here because of this big open frame design. They didn't decide to build a little box or cover. They just left it out. It's weather sealed, easy to access. And if you ever have controller issues or you have to swap one out, upgrade one, trying to fish them out of these big tubes sometimes may look easy, but it's not. And having this right here is going to save you hours of work and frustration when you do maintenance on your bike. All right, so let's take a look at some of the things that we would like to see improved or tweaked on the next version that would just make it that much better. So first things first, if you look at the way everything is kind of handled up here, there's a lot going on. So visually and literally with the cables. So we have a very short handlebar to the fork distance, and then we have a very narrow handlebar, and it just creates a lot of wires really close together and jumbled up right here. Along with the controls, everything just feels kind of cluttered in the cockpit. Now, this doesn't take away from its ability to ride, but it does make life just a little bit more frustrating when you need to do, say you're gonna bleed your brakes or run different brake cables or do some shift cable work. Things like that just start to become a headache when you've got a ton of cables everywhere, and I would just like to see them cleaned up a little bit or streamlined in a different way. Now, on that same note, again, very jumbled handlebar, but a lot of that is due to the type of handlebar, the BMX style we have, which looks very cool, but it's also very narrow, and it just creates a limited space to have all of these features. And then in addition to that, there's no distance to raise or no ability to raise the handlebars on this at all. It's fixed at a just basically slam down, no space there. And that's all you've got. You can tilt it, but you can't raise or lower the handlebars. And on a moped bike, that's not a huge deal, but depending on your height, that could really make or break the fit and feel when you're riding the bike. And then the last thing is this fixed seat. So plus sides, it's very comfortable. It doesn't require any maintenance. It's ready to go, you know, the way it sits. No bolts are gonna get loose. It's not like a regular bike saddle, but we have a very short space here for any kind of pedal extension. Although it is a moped bike and most people will throttle around, just having the ability to properly pedal would be really nice. And I think if you just added some sort of, maybe when the bike is purchased, you could include a couple like aluminum spacer blocks that could go under and just allow people to raise or lower that seat just a bit for their height. It's not totally a deal breaker, but it's just something that would make the build on this just that much better. All right, so that wraps up my thoughts on things that we liked and things that we would improve on the next go-round for the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus. All in all, really well done, and it's a super fun bike. All right, guys, out here on the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus. Now, this is a moto-style bike, moped style, so you've got this elongated saddle that when you get on the bike, it's super, super comfortable. I love moped saddles. I could ride these for hours. It just won't bother you like a typical bike seat, which is really nice. Now, I've already discussed the seat height as far as it being a fixed seat height, and you don't really have proper pedal extension for, for true, like, ergonomically correct pedaling. But you can certainly still pedal. I don't know if you can see my knees. They just come a little higher than normal. But that's the beauty of this bike having pedals and a drivetrain, is I can still pedal it, use all 8 gears, and have that flexibility for terrain if I need it. And then, of course, you've got throttle on demand to 20 miles an hour. Now, to get to 28, in theory, that would be hard on this because you can't pedal properly and you have to use the pedal assist to get to 28. But Retrospec really thought of that in advance, and they used a cadence sensor on this bike. And normally I would say, oh, a cadence sensor is not as premium as a torque sensor. It's not going to feel as refined and natural for pedaling. But you don't want that or need that on a moped because you're not doing proper pedaling. You're kind of just spinning your legs, get the cadence sensor to activate, and then the motor's going to push you. So I can throttle to 20. We're about 10 miles an hour now, use the throttle, and it's going to top out at 20. And right there is as far as that's going to take me. So it'll just sit there at 20 miles an hour, which is good, and that's a great cruising speed, and that's actually the, kind of the limit for where I'm at. But how do you go to 28 when you don't have proper pedaling? You would think, you'd have to be spinning your legs like a madman, but really that's where cadence sensors shine, and I think that should be the standard for mopeds because, and we'll get around this person in front of me. I'll show you how that works, or how I make it work. Actually, I'm going to stop and do a throttle test here. Just a second. The weather's getting nice, and people are heading back outside. All right, so I'm going to stop, and then we are going to... Speaking of stopping, these Tektro brakes are great. They're like probably one of the best bang for buck values out there. The Tektro 2-piston hydraulic disc brake set that we have here. You see them on a lot of DTC bikes because they work really, really well, and they're not super expensive, and they have that brand recognition and trust. They will last and can be serviced locally. Anyway, the brakes are solid. Let's go from a dead stop to 20, and then I'll show you how to get to 20 to 28, and just how easy it is with a cadence sensor. So 3, 2, 1. Balance was not good there. We'll restart that. All right, 3, 2, 1. So a little bit reserved right off the line, which some people will appreciate when they don't want to be jumping off the line. But once you get past 10, it's really confident, and we're already at 20 miles an hour. And on throttle, that's where we stay. You can't get past 20 on a throttle e-bike, which is, the legality by design of it. But getting to 28, if this bike had a torque sensor, it'd be very challenging and feel very awkward because you would need to pedal with a certain amount of force and a certain amount of speed and cadence. And when the bike's not fit for true pedaling like mopeds are, that is just hard. So let's get to 20. And then here we're kind of topped out on throttle, but all I have to do, and hopefully you can see it, is just slowly spin the pedals. So just watch. I barely pedal. I'm not putting any pressure down. Oh, I should probably bump my PAS there. There we go. So there we go. I just move my legs, and the speed goes up. I don't need to be pushing a certain distance, a certain speed, a certain pressure. It just handles all that for me. And all I gotta do is just move my legs. I just feel like it's a really solid way to let a moped be a moped on an e-bike without needing to pedal a certain speed with a certain pressure that a torque sensor requires. Honestly, guys, that was a really long-winded way of saying cadence sensors are a great choice on mopeds. And finally, comfort. This bike is so comfortable. This saddle is, it's probably 4 inches deep, so it's just super cushioned, easy to use. And then you have suspension fork up front, plus 4-inch wide tires. It's just really comfortable and smooth. And you can go off-road. You can just do a little bit of anything in this bike. It's going to be great for somebody, if I was a younger guy and still in college or worked locally and didn't have the need for a truck or no kids, this would be an ideal just daily commuter. You can zip around town. You can get in and out of where you got to go. You can take city paths. It looks cool. It's something you could just kind of cruise around town and have fun on with no car payment. I mean, it'd kind of be a no-brainer if I was in a position where that worked for me. or just a fun little pit bike to have around the camp, have at the house, just mess around. They're just fun bikes that can be used for a little bit of anything within reason, of course. And they just have classically cool looks. I just think they're solid all around. All right, guys, the Retrospec Valen Rev Plus. Kind of a fun bike in general. I had it for a couple weeks, got to play around with it. I really enjoyed just cruising around. If this was something I would buy personally if I was still in college or wanted a little cheap commuter that's under that $2,000 price point, but still looks cool, gets me around, easy to ride, and super comfortable. So if that's your jam or you're interested in a bike like this and you have a question maybe I didn't answer, leave a comment down below. I do reply to everybody. And if you haven't done so already, consider liking and subscribing to the EBR channel. And until the next review, I'll see you guys out on the trail.